Oh, hello there, yes, hurtling our way through a rather damp July, which of course is very good news for the climate deniers amongst us. Well, it's not hot here, they all scream. Anyway, talking about deniers, I thought we'd look at the intrinsically beautiful world of Emma Webb, the basic epitome of everything that is 55 Tufton Street, and she cropped up in the Daily Telegraph yesterday, talking about what a dreadful time Christians are having in this country. So let's dive into that and sort of pick it apart, which isn't hard. Britain is no country for Christians. The suspension of a Tory councillor hints at a growing intolerance for our official religion. Yes, it does, doesn't it? Right. At a time when society is increasingly turning against Christians for their beliefs, they will find little sanctuary in the Church of England. Sanctuary, notice that? Think of Esmeralda, yeah. No, don't. Pride is a virtue, not a virtue, but a sin, tweeted King Lowell, a Tory councillor who's just been suspended from the party and is under investigation by Conservative headquarters. King Lowell defended his position, explaining, "What I said was biblically sound and a protected expression of the Christian faith." Except maybe it isn't. Just to go on a little bit further, pride to the traditional Christian mind is one of the 7 deadly sins, but to society's ears, the word has become wrapped up first with LGBT rights and now with broader social justice activism. Yes, but I don't know about you. Perhaps it's because I'm an old git. It could be. When I think of pride, I think of sin and fools and things like that. I don't necessarily think of flags, but perhaps that's just me being an oldie. Anyway, yes, Lowell, yes, it's really dreadful, except, of course, he was suspended because he's a councillor. If you look at the local press who have covered this, they're not wildly enamoured with him. A councillor represents the people in their constituency, right? Yeah? So that includes all people. So it's not very healthy or wise for a councillor who doesn't have protected homophobic beliefs, oddly enough, it's not a protected belief, to start spouting about it. Yes, not that that's going to stop, of course, the sense of martyrdom that King has. Just reading on, Lowell joins the ranks of an increasing number of Christians who feel that modern-day Britain can no longer be a natural home for those who hold certain beliefs. Isabel Vaughan Spruce, a charity worker, was arrested twice and charged on 4 counts for silent prayer, thought crime, 1984, just in case you weren't there, near an abortion facility. Right, just before we go any further, of course, yes, you notice there, arrested twice and charged. What was she charged with? Well, contempt of court. Why? Because she was harassing people at an abortion clinic. The courts got an exclusion zone for her that she deliberately went into in order to be arrested. That way she guaranteed her own martyrdom, didn't she? Not that you'd hear that necessarily from various cosplay vicars or other, especially not Emma. Here, will you? Yes. Harassing people in distress. Presumably that's a protected thing as well, is it? Dr. David McCurth, a Christian doctor, was sacked after misgendering trans patients because it violated his conscience. He later lost a discrimination claim against the government, with a tribunal concluding that beliefs which restrict the fundamental rights of others are not protected under the Equality Act. Yes, indeed. It's really odd, isn't it, that you aren't allowed to be a hateful bigot in your job. Probably a good thing, you might be saying, but apparently not. No, apparently it's all a case of a growing intolerance against that persecuted minority of people that are Christians. Bless them. The Church of England is becoming consumed by ideas that are not only extraneous to traditional Christian teachings, but in some cases are opposed to it. Bear that one in mind, because we don't actually get to hear any of these. But anyway, those who hold these teachings are being squeezed out. In some instances, the leadership, eager to swallow every so-called progressive pill, red and blue pill, there you go, now seem to view Christ himself as a problem. Yes, don't they just? How else can we interpret Stephen Cotterill's complaints about that the Lord's Prayer is problematic? This, then, is how you should pray, says Christ himself in Matthew 6:9. Yet the most reverend and right honourable Stephen Cotterill thinks that its language is too patriarchal. The Christian Church being patriarchal? Gosh, I've never heard that one before. Yes, I mean, if you're going to level anything against the Christian Church, I guess patriarchy is one of the biggies, isn't it? Let's think of the Christian churches like, I don't know, maybe the Catholic one for a brief moment. What does the Catholic Church, in terms of its patriarchal views, bring into mind? Tolerance? The teachings of Jesus? Not really, does it? Yes, anyway, just to move on. I've lost my place now. While parishes are turning into dust, churches left to lie fallow, the bishop's attention is taken up by follies like a commission into gendered language. Yes, indeed, imagine keeping up with the times and becoming more modern, eh? Don't want that with the church, do we? We want old-fashioned church. We want sin to be punished. It was reported last week that York Minster has allegedly prevented pro-life group who are critical of the Archbishop of Canterbury from attending public worship within the cathedral, while allowing climate activists to enter placards in hand. It has since denied the claims. Yes, indeed. And again, if you look at the local press, they do deny the claims, and it would appear that they're telling the truth. Still, merely reporting something is good enough for it to be proof in your right-winger sphere, isn't it? Yeah? It's good enough, yeah? Yeah, if we have a report from Civitas, come back onto them later, but if we have a report from them, then we know it must be true because it's reported on GBNews, and it must be news because it's in the Civitas report. And again, we'll come back to that notion in a very short period of time. Bishop Cathedral recently hosted an event. Bristol Cathedral recently hosted an event with Bristol Climate Choir and Extinction Rebellion. Sounds cool. Progressing with banners through the church in a spectacle that resembled something of a medieval or pagan ritual. Imagine that. Going to a church and seeing something that looked medieval. I'll leave that one hanging in here. Can't make it up. Anyway, the Bishop of Bristol has in the past been explicit in her support of XR activist clergy, commenting on the acquittal of Reverend Sue Parfitt after she engaged in peaceful protest outside a Ministry of Defence site. Who does that remind you of, engaging in peaceful protest? Anyway, leaving that aside, Reverend Vivian Fall said, I share with her the conviction the world is facing a climate and ecological crisis, and we're not yet moving fast enough to tackle it. Yes, indeed. Do you see the problem here is you must state your views if you're a Christian, but you mustn't state views that are a bit left-wing. That's the issue, isn't it? It's not, look at these Christians, they're all being persecuted, because after all, if you're going to have a go at the church itself through the through the press, isn't that a form of persecution? No, obviously not. When we have right on our side, when Jesus is with us, Jesus, who'd be more than happy with humans sort of, committing an extinction level event. I'm sure that's in the Bible somewhere. Such is the fixation with net zero that the Church of England is said to be considering human composting as an alternative to burial or cremation. Bishops may establish a consultation group to assess theological considerations. Yes, it sounds like something they might do if there are other ways of getting rid of bodies. If you look at, a book like maybe London Necropolis, which is all about the problems the Victorians had with disposing of bodies, you might well think it was a good thing for the church to look into. Emma doesn't know anything about that, so she doesn't. Anyway, any stick to beat the dog in the rain, just to mix a whole bunch of metaphors. Right, here we go. Teaching guidance by the Diocese of Edmondsbury and Ipswich states that pupils should be learned about white privilege using a white supremacy pyramid. Yes, now, a few days ago I discussed that in one of my videos. She's just put this here. Nobody reading this in the Daily Telegraph will have any idea what that is. It's just a bad thing. The white supremacy pyramid, yeah. Me neither. Yeah, you can look it up in the report. I'll leave a link. No surprise, perhaps, given that the Bishop of Edmondsbury criticised the Government Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities report after it found that factors such as family structure, class and socio-economic background had a greater impact on life chances than race. The bishop maintained there is no shortage of evidence of systemic racism, even if the report sought to argue against that. Yes, it wasn't just the bishop that was arguing that. It was basically anyone that wasn't cherry-picked by the government to prove that systemic racism wasn't real. And we'll come on to notions of what is important in a little bit. But it isn't a sign of a left-wing church. It's a sign of a church perhaps that is trying to be inclusive, you know, like they're supposed to, like counsellors are supposed to, if you like, or doctors, yeah, rather than turning people away because they're sinners, maybe. Yes, anyway, the church's chief education officer, the Reverend Canon Nigel Genders, defended the guidance, arguing that teaching racial justice has never been more important. Yeah, justice, Jesus. Leave you to make your own conclusions there. He backed C of E schools teaching the enduring impact of slavery and the reality of institutional systemic racism, and held that this work was fundamental to what we believe as Christians. Yes, indeed, and why not? If Christians are going to stand up for their rights, Emma, then you have to include that, don't you? No, says Emma. We don't. We don't want those things to be stood up for, Christians. We want Christians that hate gay people. That's the Christians we want. Those are the Christians that we're interested in. And we want Christians that are going to make up and do an awful lot of noise about abortion. Those are the Christians we want to support. I wonder why. We'll come on to that. In the Diocese of Bristol sits the 12th century Malmesbury Abbey, where Aethstan, the first Rex Anglorum, King of England, is buried. I was last there for a funeral and remembered it having an atmosphere heavy with ancient sanctity, indeed. I was last there for a funeral and remembered it having an atmosphere... paying another visit recently. What did I find? A coffee shop, sofas, television screens advertising a skate park in the Abbey, and a sprawling gift shop within the Abbey church. It seemed as though the place had been desecrated, and it was impossible not to leave feeling sad, robbed, and resigned. Yes, imagine going to a church which is sort of somewhere quite nice to go to, with like coffee and things like that. It'd be a right turn off, wouldn't it? I mean, she was complaining earlier in the piece, you notice, about people not going to church, with the kind of implication that it just isn't religious enough. Well, okay then, fine. I think we should do away with roofs. Let's make it really cold and wet for the sinners, shall we? I mean, it's just madness and nonsensical rubbish, really, isn't it? Oh, I wish it was more boring going to church. Okay, Emma, you know, you can just sit on your own in a dark room with a Bible if you want. It's not a problem. Yeah, maybe we could have a dripping ceiling or something going. You know, we can sort that out for you. Has the Bishop of Bristol forgotten Christ's words in the temple? My house will be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves. Yeah, selling coffee. I mean, that's exactly what Jesus was having a go about, wasn't he? The coffee sellers in the temple. Maybe it wasn't. Was it coffee? I don't think it was it? Yes. I certainly can't see why any of this is offensive or disrespectful, but that is indicative of the problem. Indeed, the problem, yes. Well, it's not selling playing cards alongside the hallowed funerary monument to England's first king. The Church of England is becoming so animated by controversial political ideas and syncretising these beliefs into a new theology that it looks as if they're dispensing of Christianity itself. Yes, except, of course, they aren't. They're merely doing what the Church has always done, which is alter over time. Now, like I say, I mean, this is intellectually full of holes, as I hope I sort of pointed out. This is, you know, the cake and eat it territory of, oh, well, we want Christians to talk about these things, but not these things. Well, I'm sorry, Emma, but we don't live in that society. And I'm sorry, but, you know, the things that you want these Christians to have a go at basically do fit into your particular area of expertise, don't they? Right? Yeah. You will notice that Emma has a lot of connections with 55 Tufton Street, Civitas, and groups like the Free Speech Union, all of whom have a very, very negative attitude when it's to religion, in particular anti-gay religion, when it isn't Christian. Yeah? Emma has a background in writing things about Islam and how evil it is. And yeah, surely these people are just saying it like it is. Why can't being rude about homosexuals be a protected belief under Islam? Yeah? Well, because it's Islam and it's brown people, and that's not where the money comes from. Because Emma, like the rest of them, 55 Tufton Street, she's often a guest on GBNews, she's often a guest with Spike, she's often a guest on the New Culture Forum. All of these people sit together and agree about absolutely everything. And the main thing they agree with is that you mustn't turn off the funding. And a lot of the funding for these groups comes from evangelical right-wing libertarians from the good old US of A, and they're very interested in not having an abortion or indeed any form of women's contraceptive rights, and they're very, very keen on beating up on trans or gay people. They don't want Muslims to do it, though, because that's wrong, because obviously that's the wrong religion. Yeah, and this is the issue here. I don't know. I mean, as I say, please do shoot me down in flames about this. Maybe I'm missing something here, but I find it very, very hard to get upset about anti-abortion groups that deliberately get themselves arrested, or indeed a county councillor who can't actually do his job and then immediately jumps up and down and tries to find legal loopholes. I mean, he'll get a lot of funding and it will turn up on GBNews, it's guaranteed, because after all, they all love their martyrdom, don't they? But they're not martyrs at all. They're bigots that want the right to be more bigoted. Anyway, do have a lovely day. It's my end of term. Isn't that great?